Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge. Okay friends, hi! Welcome to another reading wrap up that goes up weekly. Sorry this is going up a little late on a Sunday, but I was going to do what I do sometimes when I'm late getting it up is the next week do a double week, but I actually got through a lot of books this week, and so I don't want to wait till next week and then have like 30 books in a wrap up, which I know you guys don't mind. You tell me you guys are so supportive for whatever ends up happening, but it's for me that talking about 30 books in one video is a bit overwhelming, and I got through 11 books this last week, so we're going to go over those. But first off, yes, I just got back from camp. I go to this camp with my family and friends every, usually the end of June, beginning of July. And yes, I'm wearing my Nerdy Nuts hat because I could use some dry shampoo, but I threw on some earrings. I was like, we'll just make it work. We got a filter on the camera. It's just fine. I'm wearing my night court shirt, which I love. See if you can see it. I love my night court shirt. But yeah, we have 11 books to talk about. So I was like, this is still going to be a good length of a video. It's just going to go up in Sunday afternoon instead of at 9 a.m., which is great. But before we get going, I do have 3 new patrons to welcome to supporting us here, so thank you so much. We have Joanna B, we have F San, and we have Nicole W. So thank you all so much for supporting me here. It means the world. It keeps it going. And yeah, I love also reaching out and talking to you guys, so feel free to message me anytime on the Patreon. I'm happy to chat. It's not an imposition at all. If I'm busy, I just won't get back to you right away. But yeah, thank you all so much. And let's get right into it, because like I said, we have a ways to go. So the first one, I do have my notes down here. I didn't do my normal thing where I plug everything in since I'm just getting back and I want to take the time to put everything in my spreadsheet. So if I forget a few names this time around, pardon me. Again, I did bring up my notes, so we'll see. But the first book that I finished was The Mist Thief by L.J. Andrews. Now, I have been loving what I've read from this series. I read The Ever King and Ever Queen in the last couple of weeks, and I'm really glad that I did that. So I signed up for this with the Nerd Fam, which they mostly focus on fantasy romance. And I have read some really cool fantasies with them from authors I'd never tried before. And when there was the opportunity to sign up for The Mist Thief, they said that this was like, you know, I've talked about this already. I know it's like Vikings meets pirates, and there's fae, and there's different powers, and there's fated mates, and these are all things that get my gears going. They get me excited. And this one does start with a new couple, and I understand now what they meant, but I think it is smart to start with the Ever King and Ever Queen, because the events at the end of the Ever Queen directly lead into this one. But again, you can go by what the author said. She also does a sweet little thing here for you, where she does do, let me find it here. She does do an Everseas recap right here. So if you like what I say about this one and you're like, Jen, I don't need to start at the beginning, she does do a recap, you know, or like a previously on that would get you up to speed if you wanted to. But if you saw my reviews for the Ever Queen and Ever, or the Ever King and Ever Queen, you'll know that I loved them. So why skip it? And as far as I can tell, this one is concluded with this couple. I feel like this couple had satisfaction, and I think the next book is going to be another couple. Don't hold me to that because I don't know the blurb for book 4, but I feel like Jonas and Scotty were, like, there wasn't a cliffhanger for them, and the epilogue of this one mentions another couple as having gone missing. So I think we're moving on to another couple. So this one might be like a standalone couple anyway. But yeah, so this one is about Scotty. It said S-K-A-D, and I've ended up saying like Scotty because I think that's how it was pronounced in the Ever King and Queen. And again, we meet her at the end of the Ever Queen, and she's actually protecting her grandfather, and she's using her power, and she almost kills Jonas's little brother. I can't remember his name off the top of my head right now. I can't remember what the brother's name was, but Jonas is obviously very pissed about this, and he's called the Nightmare Prince. He can make you believe that you're seeing your like greatest nightmare, like that kind of thing. And she is the mist thief. That's how LJ Andrews kind of labels the chapters, is it'll say the mist thief for Scotty, and it'll say the nightmare prince for Jonas. Let me see if I can find one. Yeah, it'll say the nightmare prince for Jonas. Also in this physical copy, which is so beautiful, there is some like artwork throughout. So there's a picture of them as a couple. Here's a really badass picture of him coming out of the mist and later on. So there's some really cool artwork throughout here. But anyway, she almost kills his little brother, and she's being used by one of the other like fae in this story, and her and this guy are actually engaged to each other, and the only way to get her out of this engagement is for her to be engaged to someone of equal or more power than the man she's currently promised to. So in steps Jonas, who is also a prince, and you know, he wants to make sure that her powers can't be used against his people, because whichever group that like she's aligned with, like whoever she gets married into, she can't use her powers against them. That's how I was reading it. Again, you guys know around here I love fantasy romance, but I won't pretend that I am the most bestest at explaining a fantasy world. Like, I'm just not. I love it so much, but I'm a basic bitch when it comes to fantasy stuff. Like, I want the romance to be the most important. And I have to say, that's what I felt with this book. I really felt like the romance was some of the most important part, because once these two get into their arranged marriage, she had been kind of pushed into this place where she was becoming less like empathetic and more just like numb to a lot of things, the more that she uses her power for like bad things, as it were. And so the more time she spends with Jonas and his family, the more she really comes back into her feels. You'll also know, if you watched a recent video I did, I put this book in a recommendations for like sexual healing or healing through relationship. Now, while Scotty wasn't like raped or assaulted in that way, she was kind of used for her body. Her partners generally didn't care about her. Again, she was very numb to a lot of that. And so why I put this in like healing intimacy video is because the way that Jonas and her become so connected through not only their physical aspects, of course, like there's so much more to them than just that, but particularly the way that Jonas like dotes on her and falls for her, and she doesn't have to be the tough one all the time. Like, I just love watching that happen for a woman. And Jonas, he really does that. He's a very good example in his parents, and I really hope that Jonas's parents are one of the couples in the other series that I haven't read yet, because I do plan to go back and read that other series that has 9 books in it. I do plan to go back to read those, because there are audios for all of those. So let's see, what else do I want to say? Because yes, I listened to the Ever King and the Ever Queen. This one, the audiobook, isn't coming, I think, until October. So, you know, maybe if you're one of my besties who needs an audiobook, you might want to wait on this one. But I really loved the Ever King and Queen, like I said. And this one, I just loved how they grew together. I love how her and Jonas, you know, this was only supposed to be a marriage of alliance. Like, they weren't going to have any feelings. Again, he hates her in this beginning. He is almost kind of marrying her out of a little bit of vengeance, because he knows she doesn't want to marry him. She doesn't want to marry like anybody. But he knows that it's the way to keep his family safe. Again, because if he's married to her and her alliance is with him, then she can't use her power against him. And what is her power? I should probably say that. So she's called the Mist Thief. So she can steal anything, is how it's described. Like, she can steal your powers from you. She can steal items and things, and it sounds like even like places. Like, she could make a place disappear. I don't know. Again, the magic part of this, I didn't quite zone in on fully, but that you can see why they would want someone as powerful as her on their side. And they also want her to remain in touch with her humanity. And that was the danger of her being paired with this evil asshole, is that the things he was asking her to do and losing her humanity, like, it was making things turn very dark. So I probably did an awful job explaining this one. You know, I'm just not the bestest, but I will say the parts that matter most to me is the romance. The fantasy is always like the cherry on top for me in a fantasy romance. I know, it's strange. But this romance was really great. I loved all the side characters. I feel like they were very rich and very like full, and it just made me want to read more from this author. So this is becoming a new favorite fantasy series for me. I loved, like I said, I'll say it again, I love the Ever King and the Ever Queen. I loved Eric and Livia, and I really loved Jonas and Scotty as well. They were beautiful. There was a really hot scene in here too. I'll tell you about a spicy scene. Okay, they're having this scene where he is giving her a bath, and he is giving her a little of this, if you know what I mean, and she's sitting in the bath, and he asks her to stand up so that once she's up out of the water, he can take his hands out and taste her, because he's like, I didn't want to lose a single drop of you. So literally keeps his hands in there, gets her to stand up so that it doesn't wash off of his hands if he took his hand out in the bath. Okay, I'm just saying. Jonas is hot. Okay, I was reading this in the car on a road trip, and I was like, ooh. I wasn't driving, obviously, and I was like, oh my. So anyway, I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars. It's a 3 on the spice scale. There is some content warnings for self-harm, and part of that is coming from, like, I don't want to spoil it, but she isn't self-harming in the direct way of like trying to punish herself, but there is some events that lead her to self-harm, and they were, oh, my poor baby, I loved her. There was abusive previous relationships, and there are death of loved ones in this. So really liked this, highly recommend LJ Andrews, and I hope you'll give her a go. All right, next up, I had an ALC and an ARC. So if you don't know an ALC, Advanced Listening Copy, that's basically, you know, an ARC, but it's in audio format. And an ARC is an advanced reading copy. There's always someone who doesn't know that, and that is no problem. Happy to explain. So this is book 2 in the Plain Daisy Ranch series by Piper Rain. So Piper Rain and P. Rain, they are the same author duo, and I have been enjoying particularly their Midnight Manor series, which are like dark, that's under the P. Rain title. But this one I was a bit disappointed by. So this is a country kind of like cowboy style one. And the first one in this was The One I Left Behind, and that was a second chance romance. And this one is a marriage of convenience between two best friends. And that is honestly where the trouble came for me. I won't pretend otherwise, okay? Like, I was very excited to read about Jude is the hero's name. I have my notes down here, as I said. And our heroine is Sadie. And they have been friends their whole lives, okay? They're in their mid-30s. Sadie has been helping take care of her mother. After her mother, we discover she had some, I can't remember what she has. She has some type of long-term disease. Does she have MS? I can't remember what it was, so I'm not going to speak to it. But she had to come back home and has been helping with that. And at the very beginning of this book, she is actually ready to finally tell Jude that she loves him. Like, she is like, I've waited long enough. I want a chance to be with him. So literally they're going to meet for dinner, and she's going to finally like go for it. Because everybody knows they should be together. They're that type of couple, right? And then when she is getting ready to meet him, she gets a call from her mom, and her dad has had a heart attack and he dies. Very sad. And not only does he die, but we discover that he's in all this debt. The farm, like, they had a flood that ruined some of their land, and they're just right on the edge of, you know, losing everything. And they only have so long before they can get it back. So now it's like, well, forget about telling Jude what I was going to tell him. Like, we just need to survive. And so she tries to get a bank loan, and they tell her, like, you can't, like, there's no collateral you have to offer. And it starts floating around that she would have the collateral, like, if she were to be married, perhaps to Jude, who their family ranch has been very successful in the past years. Now, Jude's family, who we know, the Naughton boys, we love them, like, they have been good friends with the father. He has helped them when they needed it, and back and forth, and so he wants to help. But when Jude goes to his dad and asks if they can put their farm up for collateral, like his part of the farm, the dad's like, son, I know how much you care about them. They're not actually our family. We can't put our farm at risk. Like, we have our family to worry about. Like, there's so many other ways we can help, but we can't put our farm on the line when they're not actually family, right? And the dad is being very understanding, of course, but he's like, we can't risk it. So what does Jude do? He offers to marry her, because if they're married, then they are actually family. And then his dad wouldn't say anything otherwise about it. So this becomes a marriage of convenience. But what made this one drive me up a wall, guys, okay? And y'all maybe know where I'm going with this. These are supposedly best friends their whole lives, okay? They've been back and forth, will they, won't they? They think the other one doesn't feel that way about them. They've maybe thought about having it be more, and it was never the time. It was never going to work out. It just couldn't happen. Which, okay, fine. But then these two are married, and the attraction is starting to bubble over. And the amount of assumptions these two make, not even miscommunication, which is another thing, but the amount of assumptions that they make about the other person when they're supposedly, again, been friends for 3 decades. 3 decades. I have a friend in my life I've been friends for 3 decades. I don't remember much in that very first decade because we were really little, but we've been friends for 30 years, okay? I would be able to assume correctly more things about my friends than these two do, apparently. Because every time there's an option for them to assume the wrong thing, they do. And this book isn't even that long, okay? So it just was unbearably frustrating that every opportunity for them to think the wrong thing about their friend, they do. Okay. Even once they finally do start sleeping together and it's clear like this marriage isn't just going to be for the loan, like we're in love, one situation after another comes up that pulls them apart. And this is my problem that can happen with a friends to lovers that I don't like. If these two were enemies, I would understand why they would assume the wrong thing about each other. But when you're supposedly best friends for your whole life, how do you assume the wrong thing at every opportunity? At every opportunity, assume the wrong thing. Authors, make up your mind. Either they know each other or they don't. You know, either they like miscommunicate one thing or they don't. But to have them have that many things wrong in this book, it was infuriating. Like, I was getting so mad because, again, from the littlest thing to the biggest thing, they guessed wrong every time what their partner would think. And so don't tell me they're best friends, you know, like it's that kind of thing. I'm like, don't tell me they're best friends, because I have best friends. I have best friends that have been best friends for 30 years and ones for 5 years. And I still would know what they would assume easier than this, you know? So anyway, you can probably guess this one wasn't as fun as the first one was. So I gave this one 3.5, rounded up to 4 because it was an arc. And I'm nicer with that. But I did write a very extensive Goodreads review about this one, about what went wrong. And it got in its own way so much in this case. So I was sad for that. But moving right along, I talked about that one a whole lot. I read Catching Sparks by Hannah Cohen. This is another ALC. This book is already out on ebook. You can get this. The ALC should be available next week. I don't know, it should be available very soon. But I got this from Must Love Audio. And this was my first Hannah Cohen. So I've never read any of her stuff before. But I was so foolish to do this. I passed up on the ALC of the first book because it was when I was just starting to work with Must Love Audio. I've only been reviewing for them for I think like 3 months or so, and I wasn't quite like trying all these new authors yet. Anyway, whatever the reason. So I started with Cherry Peak, and I'm so glad I did. But this one is about Garrison Beckett, who they go by Gary. I love that they go by Gary. I feel like that's not normally a romance hero name. And our heroine is Poppy. A little more of a popular romance name. Now, Garrison, he works for a very popular record label. He's a co-owner with his dad. And in the beginning of this, he's very jaded and he fucks some things up. And so instead of like the board kind of votes for him to like take a little bit of a break. He needs to cool off and let the PR calm down because, again, he stepped over the line with something. And so he ends up getting sent to Cherry Peak, which apparently there's some connections with this place. There's this ranch and there's a small town, and he goes to stay there, and he's going to be working on this ranch for the summer or something. It's for like 8 weeks or something like that. And while he's there, he's getting put into some hard labor. This billionaire went there and is doing some of this hard labor, which is just great. But while he's there, he meets Poppy. Now, Poppy is a small town business owner. She actually owns a pole, exercise company or a small business where they do like pole classes because she feels very like empowered by dancing and, being strong in that way. But she does get judged a lot by this small town. And it does feel like, how was she able to start this business in this town? Because I gotta say, I feel like there wasn't a lot of classes ever happening at this place, but I digress. That doesn't take away from the story. But anyway, Poppy boards her horse at Cherry Peak. So that's when she's running into Gary, as well as her friends are connections with his too. So there's a couple times where they go out for drinks and Poppy's there. And Poppy and Gary have amazing chemistry. And they actually end up having a one-night stand. And they realize they are very compatible sexually. Okay, so this one does start off with heat a little bit early on in this story. But Gary has a lot of damage to work through. And again, he's not planning to be in town for very long. So soon enough, they agree to be kind of like friends with benefits, but also pretty caring of each other, if you get what I mean. Like, they're not, besides that first time where they kind of don't know how to act afterwards, they're like friends with benefits, but also kind of seeing each other at the same time while he's in town. And they just build this really beautiful relationship together. So like Gary, as I said, he's become very jaded with his life, and he's very upset with his dad for something that happened. His dad is a very good man, but his dad kind of fucked some things up. And he also still has his mom too, but his mom has osteoporosis, and she had actually at one point fallen and hurt herself. And so he's very protective over his mom as well. So there's a lot of beautiful things about Gary. He also becomes very close with the horse at this ranch, which I just love. I love it when we have an animal friend. But anyway, him and Poppy just become very close. This was a very spicy romance. It was. There was some very fun experimentations. There was toys. There was pegging happening at one point. Although I'll tell you, it is in the epilogue that we do the pegging, but there is some other toy play and dynamic play between the both of them. They both like to be in charge, and I feel like it was done in a very good way. And I love when I read a book. I mean, like this one, the cover is a bit deceiving to this one. It's that type of book, but there was also so much heart to it, because there is some stuff Gary is working through, and there's stuff Poppy's working through too. She needs to be more confident in herself. She needs to believe for more for her and her business, that there is hope for more to happen. And yeah, this is the type of story where when it's time for him to go back to his life, he's learned so much about himself, and he realizes that it can't go back to the way it was before. So I don't want to say anymore. I don't want to spoil it, but this was a really great one. I love a billionaire. I love things taking place on a ranch. I love some tight jeans and cowboy hats. So this was a real good time for me. So again, I started with book 2. I already had people asking me, can I start with book 2? You can. I did. I will go back and read the first one soon now, but I started with this book and it was just fine. I'm excited for the next book in the series, and I'm very thankful that I listened to the audiobooks. This one was read by Aiden Snow and Megan Wicks are their names, and they did wonderfully. It was fantastic. So I gave this 5 stars, and this is a 4 on the spice scale. And like I said, we have toys, there's pegging, there is spicy dynamics, there's some spanking, there's some tying down, like there's some hot stuff in this, but it also had a lot of heart. I was working on this one while I was working on my next book nook that I'm making, and boy, it got a little hot while we were doing it for sure. Okay, next up, I read this little quick one called Fuck It by Selena Moore. Now, I will tell you that I saw someone else who'd read an arc of this book. I don't even remember who it was I saw on my Instagram, but I saw this cover and I thought it was hot, okay? I don't know why I think this cigarette in her mouth looks so hot, but I did. And then I read what it was about, and this is a married couple that's in their mid-40s, and they've been together for a long time, and they decide they want to spice up their marriage. Now, I hear these things, and they all get me pretty excited, because I do love when a couple is experimenting. I love when we add a third person in, and she's very attracted to her boss. They actually live in Greece right now. And her relationship, her husband is very willing to be adventurous. They've had a lot of fun over the years, and she finds her boss very attractive. And so she ends up asking her husband if they could invite her boss in to have like a sexual experience with them. And her husband is like, well, if he's open to it, I'm up for it. It sounds good. Let's do it. And so she goes about kind of luring her boss in and saying like, yeah, my husband's okay with it. He thinks it'd be really hot. Like, let's do it. And I was in for this. Like, I was like, this could be hot. Let's go. But what did not go well for me at all was that this became a cheating book, because her husband was okay with it and it was fine if they did other stuff together. But then it kept happening, and this wasn't an MMF thing. It had been an MFM scene, and now like she's falling in love with her boss and he's falling in love with her, and it became a cheating story. And I don't know, that's not what I wanted it to be, particularly because there's then this huge blow up. And also like her husband was very accepting of it, and he'd even said like he was okay with them messing around sometime without him too. Like he had said that. But then when it actually happened, he was incredibly jealous, and we never addressed that. It just was like he was jealous, and now he's like, now I don't want it to happen. So it was like he had said yes, it was okay, and then it wasn't anymore. And now her boss is falling in love with her, but like she's not planning to leave her husband. So instead this just became, it was, I don't know. I did not enjoy it at all, because I don't like it when it's cheating. I don't. I'm okay with it to the degree that like Sarah Kate did in The Homewrecker, where it was a cheating that was trying to lead to an MMF, right? The same in a Sierra Simone. Like, I don't want to read about cheating as it is, but I can do it if we're leading towards a poly romance. Like, I can do it then, because it's like, you know, we're going to make mistakes in the beginning of getting ourselves to a poly. Like, who's allowed to have sex without other people there? Do you always all have to be there? Do you just have to tell the person? Like, that is what I find interesting in an MMF dynamic. Even if it's going to be a reverse harem or an MFM, like everyone has to be okay with it. I don't like it to be cheating. And then in the end, she stayed with her husband, and he like her boss found someone else. So there was just a lot of cheating. And then her husband said he was okay with it, but then he wasn't, but then he stayed with her. And so, yeah, this was called Fuck It, and I say fuck it to this book. I ended up giving it 2 stars. It was an erotic story. I don't want to call it an erotic romance, because nobody really, like, fell in love and stayed together. Like, she was with her husband, and she ended with her husband. But she was falling in love with her boss, and then it didn't work out with him. So I don't even consider this one, like, that much of a romance. It was like an erotic novella, because she got to have her spicy experiment, but like no new relationship was built. Does that make sense? I mean, whatever. People can still call it that. I mean, she does stay with her husband. It's a HEA in that way, but like she cheated on her husband and he just stayed with her. She got to fuck her boss a whole bunch, lie to her husband, and then keep her husband. So I didn't care for it. So I gave it 2 stars, and I was very sad because I pre-ordered this one because I thought I would like it so much. And gosh darn it, I should know better. I should know better by now. But, you know, every once in a while, I try to deviate and then I get screwed. So, yeah, this was a 2 star for me. Did not care for it at all. All right. Then I reread Dear Grumpy Boss by Julia Wolf. I am annotating this series for one of my patrons, so I'm rereading the Harder They Fall series, which by no means is a travesty for me at all. But this is the book that I like the least in the series, and I think it's funny too because a lot of my beloved viewers and people who listen to my opinions on books, a lot of people jumped right to P.S. You're Intolerable because that's what I told people to do, because I wasn't really sold on this series with this book, which we'll get around to why. I actually enjoyed it a little bit more, I think, upon reread, and we'll get to that in a minute. But the second book I liked a lot, and then the third book, I mean, it was my favorite book last year, so you guys understand. And I still suggest that. I'm like, you can go right to P.S. You're Intolerable if you want. It's totally fine. Any book in this series can be read standalone pretty well, because for the most part, we stick with the characters of this book and whatever. But this one's fun to reread for a couple of reasons. One, Elise, the heroine of this, is Elliot's sister. So it's Elliot and Elise. They both call each other Elle for their nicknames, which is cute. And Elise is finding out that she has a horrible boyfriend, and so she ghosts him in an intense way. Like, she gets her friends to pretend she never existed whenever her ex tries to talk about her. They're like, who's Elise? I don't know who Elise is. Like, you're crazy. So makes, like, she gaslights him hard, and it's kind of funny, but it's also a little bit like mean. Like, he did some mean stuff, but he wasn't like abusive to her or beat her or cheat on her. He was just a sleaze, you know. I don't know, whatever. People have their own opinions. It went hard, the things that like, literally he felt like he was crazy. So that was interesting. But then we have Weston, who owns the like athletic, like outdoor company, but he tries to make it all be like eco-friendly and all these things. So he's a billionaire, and he's friends with, of course, Elliot and wow, his name just went out of my head. So Luca, Elliot, and Weston are all friends. And so anyway, Elise moves to town. Elliot immediately, when he finds out that her boyfriend was a sad sack of shit, he gets her to move to Colorado, to Denver, and she gets a job with Weston. So she's working in his company. She is not his, like, secretary, you know, the way that Catherine is for Elliot, but she's working in his company, and they've always been really close. Like, Weston has been very close with Elliot. There was a bit of kind of a falling out when they were, like, younger, but it also was just a lot of, like, growing apart. I don't know. It was weird. But anyway, so they start to fall for each other while they're working together. So there we go. The reasons why this one, to me, isn't as great as the other three. I feel like Julia was finding her vibe for what her billionaires are like. And what we like about her billionaires is how completely head over heels gone they are for their gal, and how they will belly crawl over broken glass for their woman. And Weston, he is easily obsessed with his business. And I understand that about him. Like, you know, you don't become a billionaire CEO without being a little bit obsessed about it. But it's very interesting because there's a line in here that Elliot even says, you know, when he's trying to be accepting of Weston and Elise, is he's like, you choose what your priorities are. You are a billionaire. You could find people to run your company for you. So who's more important, my sister or this business? Because you have to decide, like, whatever it is, you need to decide and stick to it. And I love that about Elliot, because we'll see that ring true for him, don't we? Where when he has a new priority, it's his priority, and fuck everything else, right? So there's just a bit of, like, Weston struggling to do that. And then also, Elise also has very high expectations very quickly. So there's just kind of this thing of, like, what their third act situation is, just felt kind of like not what came natural for Julia to write, if that makes sense. So yeah, this one has a third act breakup, a third act conflict that I just don't care for, and it spoils a bit of it. So when I looked back to, I did rate this one a 5-star when I read the arc of it, right? I read that like almost 2 years ago. But now when I compare it to the other ones, this is more of like a 4 for me. And then books 2 and 4 are 5 stars. And of course, it's a 6-star with Elliot. But it was still good. And it was great to revisit this because I liked being reminded of a lot of the connections. So I'm very much looking forward to rereading Sincerely Your Inconvenient Wife, because that one is, I mean, that one was like my favorite until I read P.S. You're Intolerable. So, but yeah, this is still good. I will just be clear. This is still really good. It just, if you've read P.S. You're Intolerable first, I feel like you won't like that one as much. If this is still a series you want to read, I think you should start at the beginning, because then you get to grow into Elliot and just like love it. But if you start with Elliot, the other ones are going to feel a bit disappointing. I'm just saying it's going to happen that you'll feel a bit disappointed that way. Okay. Then I read Bound to the Shadow Prince by Ruby Dixon. So I actually had an arc of this one for ages. And of course I didn't get to it soon enough, but I did finish this book the day after it was supposed to come out. And this is not actually connected to her Bound to like the like God series. This is a standalone fantasy romance, and it has a fantastic beginning. Like, I will tell you that right off the jump. I loved the beginning of this story, where we have our heroine, let's see, what's her name actually here? Chandra, and we have Nemeth. And so Nemeth, his people, think of them as like gargoyles. That's how I'm thinking of them, because they're supposed to be like this dark gray skin. They have wings, no hair, very hard bodies. So I was picturing them as like gargoyles in my head. And then our heroine, Chandra, is a human princess. She has this type of disease that's a mix between type 1 diabetes and something else. It has a magical name, but I did read the note at the end from Ruby Dixon, and that is kind of what she was basing it off of. She has some other things that she blended, and I thought that was very interesting, because we're in a fantasy world, so the way that they take care of the disease is very interesting. But the beginning of this is that she actually gets put in a tower with Nemeth. She and him are both sacrifices to this certain god. So they're two different peoples who are actually warring peoples. They each are supposed to send someone in every generation to be a sacrifice for 7 years and have to live in this tower and never leave. They're supposed to like pray and like be there for their people's sacrifice or whatever. Again, I'm bad at explaining fantasy worlds, so don't at me. That, you know, is not my easiest thing. But anyway, the real trick is she was not supposed to be the one put in the tower. She is the middle princess. She has an older sister and a younger sister, and her younger sister was supposed to be the one that was sent in the tower. But just a few days before it's time for the sacrifices to enter the tower and literally be bricked in with enough food to last them for a year, and then every year another supply will get dropped off, she finds out that her younger sister died in a shipwreck. And so her people need a sacrifice from the family. Now, her older sister is married to the king currently, and she's pregnant. So the only option is Chandra. And she is a spoiled, pampered princess who has a disease that she needs medicine for every day. So she is not an ideal person to be put in there. And she is very spoiled. She knows that. She's very sassy. Because of the disease that she has, she's never really expected to marry and have children. So she is free with her body. She's had sex with plenty of people. She's lived the life she wants to. Like, she's doing what she wants to, right? And now she's going to have to be this sacrifice for her people. So really hard start for her. And the first few months are very difficult for her there. And again, I told you I had a lot to talk about for this week. There was a lot of books that I got through. And I just didn't know how I felt about her to start because she's not super likable. But when I was hooked on this book, when I was absolutely hooked, so for the first few months of the story too, which does go by relatively quickly, but for the first few bits of this, her and Nemeth really stay away from each other. They don't come into each other's areas. They stay away. And then there is a night where she doesn't get her medicine in her fast enough, and she passes out and she's gonna die, but she wakes up the next day. And it turns out Nemeth has been spying on her a little bit. And he actually has watched her mix her medicine before. and give it to herself. And so he actually mixes it and gives it to her and kind of, you know, helps her out of the sickness. And when she wakes up, he asks her if they could be friends. He says that he'll help her. He's actually willing to share some of his supplies with her if she'll be his friend. And she actually offers, she's like, do you want my like body in exchange? And he's like, no. In fact, he's just shocked that she would offer that. He's like, no, we're alone in here for 7 years. Like, can't we be friends? And so begins this friendship between the two of them, which will eventually turn into love. So these two enemies are falling in love in this tower. Now, the first half of this book is about them in this tower, and I loved it. It was, no joke, 4.5, 5-star book for the first half of this story. Where it soured for me and never really picked its way back up was once we leave the tower, because we do leave the tower eventually. And I got A, very confused, and B, was not satisfied with how this ended, because this, as I said, was a standalone story. This book was like almost 600 pages, and when we got answers at the end of this, I was not satisfied with how we wrapped everything up at all. Like, I don't necessarily have wanted a second book, but I don't feel satisfied with what we got either. So I'm putting it out there. I wasn't satisfied. And I was so unsatisfied that this story that was at 5 stars, I ended up giving it a 3 at the end, because I just find it so unbelievable after, again, once they get out of this tower and they find out what's been happening in the world, the way that we're then able to wrap this up by the end, I do not believe for 1 second that we could wrap it up. So I was just very unsatisfied with it. And I'm sad that I was unsatisfied, because I do love Ruby Dixon quite a bit. And I was so into this, okay? Like, I'd already started telling my friends, like, oh, this book is so good. And then I gave this a 3-star. It's a 3.5 on the spice scale. Maybe it'll work for you. It was really good the first half, y'all. I'm telling you, it was great. I love Nemeth. And I was starting to care for Condra, because like I said, she was a spoiled princess. So I was okay with not liking her to start, right? Because she was going to live a life of privilege and being spoiled. And then all of her plans just got ruined, you know? So anyway, so yeah, let's move along, because we have better things to talk about. But I was disappointed, y'all. I was disappointed. But what I was not disappointed in, let's move along to another one that I gave 5 stars to. We won't bury the lead. I read or listened to another ALC. This one is called Mad Love by Willow Aster. This was my first Willow Aster. It's the start of a new series that'll be the Single Dad's Playbook. And I've said this before, I really wanted to try Willow Aster. I met her at a book signing earlier this year, and I actually did get a couple of her books signed. I've been trying to read those before now, but it didn't happen. But luckily, Must Love Audio offered Mad Love. Actually, I got this one from Valentine PR. They both offered it. Yeah, I got this from Valentine PR. And I snagged an advanced listening copy of this one. And y'all, I was smitten as a kitten from the jump, and it just stayed wonderful the whole time. Okay, so what do we got? We got a single dad who plays football. We have this dad finding out that he has a 2-month-old son, and the woman has passed away. That's how he finds out. So already there are some things I love here. No, I'm not happy the woman has died, but she didn't tell him about his child. This child is only 2 months old. So he didn't miss, you know, like in The Feud, which I loved, by the way, last month. His child was 9 years old by the time he found out about it, right? This child, this beautiful little boy, is only 2 months old. And our hero, which I just forgot his name. Did I write it down somewhere? What's his name? Weston? I think his name is Weston. And the heroine's name is... Weston is his name, and Sadie is hers. Oh, another Sadie. Okay, Sadie's this month. And she had been living with her sister and helping take care of her nephew. And she gets the call that her sister was in this car accident, and so does Weston. He's out with his guy friends, and he gets a call that his son is in the ER. And there's been an accident, and he's like, y'all, I don't have a son. What are you talking about? And they're like, your name is on the birth certificate. This woman was in an accident. She didn't make it. And we noticed in our records that she gave birth here. So they looked up the birth certificate, and his name was on the birth certificate. So he had no clue. He rushes to the hospital, and the sister is actually like there finding everything out. Her parents are on a vacation. I can't even imagine, like, as an aunt and a sister, if this happened, like, I can't even imagine this. But she was told by her sister that her sister had tried to get in contact with Weston, and it just didn't happen. And so she absolutely doesn't believe that Weston didn't know that he had a son. And he's like, girl, I don't know what to tell you. I did not know. I would have been here. And he even does the extra step, which I really liked about this. He asks all of his people, like his management, his like bodyguards, he's like, did anyone ever try to contact me and tell me that they were pregnant? Like, please tell me. And as far as they all know, they're like, no, no one ever did. Well, I won't tell you the whys of why this woman may or may not have tried to contact him. I won't tell you any of those things. But the point being, we start this book out with this man going all 10 fingers and 10 toes and hands and arms in on this, okay? Because he is just in awe that he has this perfect little boy who needs his love. He is so sad he missed this time, but he is so happy to have this child. He doesn't waste any time. Now, this is very difficult for Sadie because, again, she doesn't believe him. She doesn't trust him. She has been helping raise this boy, and she knows that this man is powerful and has money and has lawyers on his side. His name is on the birth certificate. He could completely rip this child away from her and her parents, and there'd be nothing they could do to stop him. If he was feeling vindictive, if he was feeling angry, he could just take this boy away. But instead, he does the unthinkable. He asks Sadie to move in with him and help him care for Caleb, is the boy's name. Because he's like, I don't know anything about being a dad, and I'm going to learn as fast as I can. But please help, because he knows you, he loves you. I would never take him away. So that's our setup. And I won't say any more. That is the setup of this story. And it just got better from there, y'all. It just got better from there. Because the tropes of this, I'll tell you that, is it might seem that this would be an enemies to lovers, but this story is actually a friends to lovers. Because these two do everything for this kid. They don't let themselves get in the way. They don't let anger or resentment or anything get in the way. This story was unfiltered joy for me. Again, besides the sad loss of this sister, like, that is sad. But every chapter made me smile, and I was just so happy the whole way through. This wasn't quite a 6-star just because I don't know why. There was a little something missing maybe for me, but maybe it's because it was a pretty, like, simple story. There's no third act breakup here. There's no other woman drama because, again, woman's gone. There's no, like, custody fights, none of that stuff. It is just beautiful happiness, okay? So this book got a 5-star from me. It's a 3 on the spice scale, and this book comes out on the 10th, and I hope you will read it because I cannot wait to read Willow Aster now after this. And the whole series is going to be single dads, so we already are getting some setups for those, and I can't wait for it. I'm ready. Give me all the football single dads, okay? I don't need convincing. All right, moving along, we'll touch on this one briefly because I have still more exciting things to talk about. So I read Next Best Fling by Gabrielle Gomez. That one comes out in a couple days as well. This is debut author. This was one that I got from Neck Alley, I think, and I was very excited to read it, but it just did not pan out for me. And to go over it very quickly, we have these two who are each in love with a different person in this couple. So one is her best friend, and then he's actually the brother of her best friend. And his name is Theo. Her name is, I don't remember her name. Do I have it right here? I bet I do. Marcella. Okay, so she's Marcella and he's Theo. Now, she's in love with his brother, and Theo is in love with the brother's fiance. And so the beginning of this is that Marcella really doesn't want to go to this anniversary or this engagement party, but she's going to show up, support her friend, and then get out of there. And she overhears Theo, who's drunk off his ass, talking about, like, walking through how he's going to tell the new fiance that he's really in love with her and that he shouldn't marry his brother. He should, like, just not do it. And Marcella overhears this, and she stops him from making a fool of himself. And instead, she brings him home to her place, lets him sleep on her couch, and she stops him from making a fool of himself. Now, the next day, there is a, like, brunch that they're supposed to go to, and she's like, you have to go to that, otherwise it's going to be hinky if you don't. So they show up at the brunch together. So now, like, everybody who's there, they saw them leave together and saw them come back together, and now people are thinking that they're hooking up. So what do? They decide to go along with it. To start with, it's kind of a fake dating, but also after they talk a little bit, they kind of admit that they would, like, a fling could be fun for them. And so they're maybe kind of fake dating, but also do want to have a fling. But there's a lot of tension in the fact that, like, his brother, who's her best friend, but is engaged to someone else, thinks that his brother would not be a good partner for her. And so he keeps sticking his nose in, and it just got very messy. Okay, like I said, I'm not going to talk about this one for long. I ended up giving this one a 3.5 star, and it's a 2.5 on the spice scale. The biggest problem, this book is called The Next Best Fling. And I said this in my review quick. I was like, we didn't even get to any sex until 60-70% in this book. And it's supposed to be about them having a fling to get over the other people. And they literally plan to be rebounds. Like, that's what they're going to do. And there's no more than a kiss until 65%. And then even afterwards, there's immediately so much drama. Like, this whole thing was angst after angst after angst after, like, missed opportunity. And then, like, oh, we have feelings for someone else, so I can't trust that you actually like me. Like, it hurt my brain. So I did not have good feelings about this one once it was over. And I didn't really care for Marcella. I really didn't care for her. She was the one who was bothering me. Like, Theo, I really liked Theo. Did not care for Marcella. So I gave this 3.5 because it was an arc, but didn't really care for it. All right, next I listened to Undeniably Forbidden by Jay Shaman, or Salmon. I never know how we say this. And this is the next book in the, what's this series called? This is the Boston Irresistible Billionaires. Okay, so this is the one that comes after Undeniably Convenient, which was the baby of Convenience one. This one is a one-night stand turned best friend's little sister turned nanny scenario, right? So we're rocking, okay? He's also a pediatric surgeon. So we have another doctor, and he has a 6-year-old daughter, 7, I don't know how she was. But anyway, these two have a one-night stand with each other, have great sex. It's wonderful. And then he sneaks out because he has an appointment to meet his new possible nanny, who his friend Jack is bringing his sister, who has previously been in Europe for the past few years. She's an artist. She was living over there, but she actually was just nannying for a couple over there for a couple months. And she's come back and is trying to get her life on track in the States. And being a nanny here would be a good, like, transition for her. And so she shows up to meet her brother's best friend again after 12 years. It's been a long time since she's seen him. He's 12 years older than her too. So, you know, he didn't recognize her when they had a fling. And so when she walks in his house, he's like, no, I can't have this woman live with me. It's going to drive me crazy because it's the best sex I've ever had. And, you know, all the things. And she convinces him to let her stay. And also his daughter loves her, so he doesn't have a choice. So this is a beautiful, slow burn, temptation lives in my house with me type of scenario. It was great. I loved it so much. And this one, it is a very slow burn. It is a lot of kind of will they, won't they to go. But there also wasn't like a third act breakup or like that kind of stuff. There was some drama from some other things. And then also of like when his best friend finds out. But I like this one again. I love the narration for this one. And I gave this one 5 stars because I don't really have any complaints about it at all. It was a 3.5 on the spice scale. They do a little bit of spanky spank and dominance play between the two of them too. So there were some hot smutty scenes in here for sure. I loved it. Okay, then I read His Tesoro by Amelia Rossi. So I was seeing this everywhere. July is actually Disability Pride Month, if you didn't know. I have a few friends who have disabilities, and I am planning to do another rec video. I haven't made another disability rec video in a while because I feel like the same books get thrown around all the time for that, and I wanted to try to find some new ones that have that. And so yes, you can look forward to, before the end of July, we'll have a rec video, hopefully soon. I just need to get it together. But anyway, this is a mafia book with a heroine who is in a wheelchair. Let's see if it says what disease she had in the, which says it causes her to have weak joints and dislocations very easily, and she is using a wheelchair at the beginning of the story. She can also use a rollator or like walker to help her get around, and she can walk sometimes too. But when she has bad days or flare-ups or injuries, she does need to be in her wheelchair. So we have Sophia, and she is a Bratva princess, and her father has basically kept her locked away because he sees her as defective. So there is a lot of ableist language in this story. There is a full warning in the beginning from the author explaining, like, you know, that whole situation you would be in, and I can't speak as if that was okay with me because again, I don't have a disability or anything like this at all, but from what I've seen with some of my friends who have mobility issues or need mobility aids, they've seen that the representation was good. Again, that's all that I can go off for, if the representation is good or not, but I really loved this story. I loved this couple so much, and so Matteo needs to make this relationship to strengthen his territory. So he's an Italian Don and she's a Bratva princess, and so he gets married to her, does not know that she has a disability, and so when he shows up for the wedding to her, she is wheeling herself down the aisle because her father is so much of a jackass that he doesn't want to walk beside his daughter in the wheelchair. She has to wheel herself up there, which is just, we'll get into it. Now, when they get married, the hero is like, there's not going to be anything between us, and that doesn't have to do with her being in a wheelchair. He just doesn't want to care about anyone. So she moves into his house. He's like, you're on this floor, I'm on that floor, never the two shall meet. You're basically just going to live here, blah, blah, blah. And she is the most precious, sweet girl. Okay, she really is. She's such a lovely, lovely woman. And she's very shy. Again, she has been very mistreated, and, you know, she's in a wheelchair that isn't even like made for her. It's very uncomfortable because she basically had to, I'll tell you this, steal her wheelchair. Her father refused to get one for her because he is humiliated by it. So there's just a lot, like there's a lot to unpack with that. But she slowly starts worming her way into Matteo's heart, and it isn't long before he just is absolutely smitten with her. This is one where she does a lot of baking, and her bodyguards really love her, by the way. Like, her bodyguards love her. And they're always baking for, or she's always baking for them. And Matteo eventually becomes very jealous of her making things for other people. And she's like, you're baking it, it's for me. You're my wife making that. Also, he finds out about a like wish list she has that her and her sister would make of the places they wanted to go and the things they wanted to do. And one of the things she always wanted was a pet. And so what does he do? He goes and finds her a support animal who can help her, like help steady her when she wants to walk and like get her medications for her. He gets her this pup whose name is Noodle. He gets her a dog named Noodle. Can you imagine a mafia boss with a dog named Noodle? How adorable. So anyway, it very quickly becomes absolute sugary sweetness between the two of them, and very spicy. I loved how some comforting aids and mobility things were used when they had sexy time. I loved how there was some BDSM in this. He really likes to use rope, and I really loved how some rope was used to actually relieve stress for her, to like kind of carry some of her like weight at different points too. Like, so good. Again, I can't speak to if those really work or not, but I feel like they were well researched for how I read it. And I thought it was fantastic. And also just things of like, she does bruise very easily and have those things. So, you know, like when he uses rope on her, he'll be like, oh, I tied it too tight. And she's like, no, you didn't. Like, I like that the bruises came from you. They weren't me just like bumping into a table or whatever. They're because you did them to me. You know, like, oh, there were so many good things. So this book was wonderful. I loved it. It very much gave me Neva Altaj vibes, right? Which to me, she's like the standard of like sweet mafia romances. Okay. So it really gave me vibes like that. Where this book kind of, and you'll see this in the reviews too. This is kind of across the board. The third act conflict of this one was so, it just kind of rolled off the rails a lot. It really did. There was a decision the hero made that just felt like it was completely against his character for everything we'd seen with him with her before. And then there's some betrayals that were just like, wow. But there was some cool moments within the crazy as well. So anyway, I gave this 4.5 stars. Honestly, it was almost a 6-star book until we got to the third act. It also is almost cheesy in some place. Like I said, if you've read Neva Altaj, you know. Some of the stuff with her, it's so sweet, it's almost cheesy. That's what we were getting with this. But like, it's so sweet, you don't care, right? You're like, this is rotting my teeth out of my mouth and I'm loving it, you know? So yeah, I gave this 4.5 stars and it was a 4 on the spice scale. Like, this got spicy by the end of it, okay? So definitely recommend. And again, from what I see, this was some great representation of a heroine who was in a wheelchair a good amount of the time. And yeah, there's some good stuff. There is, of course, some content warnings for the ableist language, the abusive parent, and a few other things you'll see in there as well that are all very detailed in the beginning. So don't skip the author's note and you'll get the full details of her thoughts on those. And then the last book, see, we're already over an hour there, but this one will be quick to talk about. Another arc that I read was An Engagement Pact by Noelle Adams. This is book 4 in her Green Valley series. Now, I haven't read all the books in this series, but I do get all of the arcs for Claire Kent and Noelle Adams, and I've been reading more and more of her Noelle Adams titles as well. And this one was we need to get married so someone can get control of their trust fund. So there wasn't really anything super special about this one. And also, I didn't feel as much of the spark that I usually do in a Noelle Adams. Because what I love about Noelle Adams, I love this about her Claire Kent titles too. But those are taking place in an apocalypse or a space scenario, so they're a little bit more like amped up. But what I like about her contemporary ones is I like that they just feel like normal people, and their like sex can be awkward and their interactions can be awkward, but they're still just like, I just love them together. This one just felt a little off. I wasn't feeling the chemistry as much as I usually do, and for it only being like 170 pages, it also felt like it was too long at the same time. So yeah, this one wasn't a win for me. I gave it a 3.5. You know, that's kind of what I do for arcs that just aren't really working for me. It was a 2.5 on the spice scale, and like, it was just okay. Like, I like the heroine's name is Vicky. My mom's name is Vicky, so I liked her name was Vicky. And the hero's name is Dan. Like, she always has like normal names, normal people, and they're like normal lives. And I like reading that sometimes, right? But this one just didn't quite float my boat. So yeah, kind of ended the week with a little bit of a fizzle. But I'm in the middle of some other really great ones. Like, I'm reading our Rake Appreciation Society book right now. I need to get started on Drums of Autumn. And I also have some other fun arcs coming out this week. So that is what happened for me this week. Again, sorry this video is going up kind of late, but I hope you enjoy it. I'll have links to all the videos that I talked about down below. If you order through Amazon, it really helps me out. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one, everybody. Bye.